Hi everyone. So I just wanted to take a quick second to go through the examples that were in this table here because I think this table does a really good job of pulling together everything that we've learned up until now. Okay, and there is a table section like this on your next test, and I know that it throws people off sometimes. It's not that I'm asking you to do anything new in this table. I'm just kind of asking you to do everything at the same time, and that can get tough. So if I look at this first one, y equals 1/2 x minus 5. That's in slope-intercept form, right? Which means my slope and my y-intercept are just kind of sitting there for me. My slope is 1/2, and my y-intercept is -5. Okay, so if it's in mx plus b form, these two things should be easy. This is the m, this is the b. Okay? The x-intercept is a little bit different. The x-intercept, we always know that y is equal to 0. So I'm going to plug a 0 in for y, and I'll do that down here. And then I have to solve for the x. I have to work backwards and figure out what x is. So this one isn't quite as obvious as some of the others. I would add the 5 to the other side. So 5 equals 1/2 of x. And then I would probably multiply by 2 on each side. You could also get away with dividing by 1/2, but multiplying by 2 gives us that 10 equals x. Okay, so my x-intercept is 10. If you wanted to check yourself, plug a 10 in there. 1/2 of 10 is 5, and then 5 minus 5 gives me 0. And that's what the x-intercept is the value of x that gives you a 0 for y. Okay, slope of a parallel line. Parallel lines always have the same slope. So really, these values and these values should match each other. So if this is 1/2, this is 1/2. And so that means that when I finish this table, this whole column should look just like this column. And then my perpendicular line, this is going to be the opposite reciprocal of my original slope. So in this case, the reciprocal would be 2/1, and then I would want to make it negative. So it would really be -2. Okay, so let's try that same thing on one that's not in slope-intercept form. This is what's in what's called standard form, and that's sort of what we learned about today. One of the things we learned about is that for slope, when we're in standard form, there's sort of a shortcut. If the m is not just sitting there for you, you can use this -a/b shortcut, okay? So in this case, I would say that my slope is -2, okay, because that's my a value, over my b value of -3, and then I would want to reduce that and make it just a regular 2/3, okay? So when your equation's in standard form, you can just take these two numbers and stack them, all right? But you do the opposite of this first number. And that, again, comes from, if you were to put this in slope-intercept form, you would subtract the 2x, which would make it negative, and then you would end up dividing by the -3. Okay, but you are allowed to just rely on that shortcut. All right, so you can use -a/b anytime you're looking for slope in one of these equations. For these ones, the y-intercept is not quite as obvious. So what we're going to have to do here, instead of just looking for b, is we're going to have to make the x into a 0. However, that shouldn't take too much work on our part. If we make the x a 0 and we cover it up, we have -3y equals 15. So then y would equal -5. Okay. And if I'm looking for the x-intercept and I make y equal to 0, I end up with, and I don't know how well you can see that, but it'll be 2x equals 15. Maybe I'll do that. 2x equals 15. Okay. And if 2x equals 15, x equals 7.5. Again, my parallel line slope would be 2/3. And my perpendicular line slope would be the opposite reciprocal, which would be -3/2. Okay, looking to see if I have enough colors to make this work all the way down. Let's see. So in that third line, I don't have an equation, but let's see what we can fill in. I have a 6 here, right, for a parallel line slope. So that means my original slope must also be 6. Okay? And once I've got that, really, here I have my slope and my y-intercept. So I should be able to come up with my equation. So y equals 6x plus 4. That comes from these two things. I will have to do a little bit of work for my x-intercept. Remember, that's where I want to make y equal to 0. So I'm going to say 0 equals 6x plus 4. Subtract the 4, so I get negative 4 equals 6x. And then divide by the 6. I'm guessing most of you are going to type that into a calculator and get negative 0.6 repeating. Decimals are okay with me here as long as you show me that it's repeating. Okay. That would also be negative 2/3. So if you had negative 2/3 down there as an answer, that would be fine too. And then my perpendicular slope, I can just look back at this 6 and say opposite reciprocal, so that would be negative 1/6. All right, the next one is very different. This x equals negative 3. This is a vertical line. Let's just keep this in mind. This is a vertical line. So my slope here is undefined. Okay. My y-intercept, if this is a vertical line, this is never going to cross the y-axis because it's going to be parallel to the y-axis. So my y-intercept is none. Okay, not 0. You have to say none. Or you can just draw like a line through that box. Okay, but if it's just an x equals equation, it has no y-intercept. The x-intercept would just be negative 3 because this would be a vertical line crossing through at x equals negative 3. My parallel slope would also be undefined. And then the opposite reciprocal of undefined, this might be a little weird to think about, but it would be 0. Because if my equation looks like this, or if my line looks like this, then my perpendicular line is going to look like this. And that line has a slope of 0. Okay, so undefined and 0 are always going to be opposite reciprocals of one another. And one more to do. Let's see if I have one more color I can throw your way. Okay. All right, we'll be boring. Here, I have a perpendicular line with a slope of 5. Okay, so if I backtrack to my original, then I would do my opposite reciprocal of that, and it would be negative 1/5. Which, by the way, I could right away go ahead and fill in this one as negative 1/5. Then just like I did up here in this third example, I can put these two things together and say my equation is y equals negative 1/5 x minus 2. Okay, that came from my slope and y-intercept. And then to find my x-intercept, just like I did here and here, I'm going to plug a 0 in for y and solve. Okay, so I would add the 2 to the other side. From here, I would probably multiply by negative 5 on both sides to cancel this out. You might divide by negative 1/5. That's fine with me. But we get negative 10 for x, and so my x-intercept is at negative 10. So this right here is what your final table should look like. And I know I did a bunch of work off to the side, but hopefully you can see the table and all of its answers in there. And this is the kind of thing I'll be looking for both on your homework assignment tonight and then, like I said, on your test. This comes up as well.